Okay, my name is Bill Rosnyai. I'm a World War II veteran. I flew as a navigator in the European Theater of Operations. Uh, we would take off. I was based in England with the 8th Air Force, and we would take off and fly over Germany, drop our bombs, and come back to England. And that was called a mission. I flew 35 missions. Now, when the Americans came over to England in 1942, the English wanted them to fly with them at night. The American general said, no, when you fly at night, you bomb cities. We have a very precise bomb site, the Northern bomb site. We can bomb buildings, rail yards, factories, bridges. We're going to fly in the daytime. The British said, well, wait a minute. Flying in the daytime is suicidal. The American general said, no, we have a very great airplane, a B-17 with 13 machine guns. We can take care of ourselves. In fact, we're called a flying fortress. The general was wrong. The British were right. It was a disaster, and the casualties were the worst ever. More airmen were lost in England than all the Marines that fought in the South Pacific. So we got over there in October of 1944, after being trained in the United States. Let me go back. When I was 18, I was drafted, but because I was in high school, they told me I could finish high school, and they'd call me up in June of 43, and it turned out that the requirements to be in the Air Corps in those days was 2 years of college and 21 years old. But because of the high casualty rate, they lowered it to high school education and 18. So I was very, very excited about getting into the Air Corps. So I applied and I was accepted. In June of 43, my parents took me down to the train station, put me on a troop train, and I was off to war. But I had to be trained. I went to basic at first and had, first of all, they cut everybody's hair. That was the Army cut, which was no hair at all on in your head. And we got all new uniforms, everything khaki, all our civilian clothes and shoes and stuff were sent back home, and that lasted about a month. I was in Biloxi, Mississippi. Then they gave me 1 semester of college, and then we went to what they call the classification center, where they had to decide, are you qualified to be a bombardier, a pilot, or a navigator? And so we went through a couple of weeks of examinations and testing and so forth. And at the end of the 2 weeks, we went before a psychiatrist, and he asked what your life was like growing up, and do you like your parents, do you like girls, or whatever they wanted to ask. Then you went before a 3-man board, and they asked me if I wanted to be a pilot, navigator, or bombardier. Now, when I was in college, I had 10 hours of flight training. And that's not solo, but I was given landing and taking off and turning and spirals and things like that. And it didn't appeal to me. So I thought, well, I didn't want to be bombardier, so I selected navigator. And then I went to navigation school for 6 months, and I graduated in June of 1944. I got my wings, I got my commission, and I was sent to Texas, where I met my crew. They had already formed, and I was the last one aboard. So for the next 6 weeks, they were training me on a B-17. We went on long trips. I was shown how to work the Nord bomb sight. I had a chance to fire a machine gun because I had one in the nose of the plane that was mine, and I had no practice with gunnery except 2 occasions, and that was it for me. Then we went to Lincoln, Nebraska, and they gave us a brand new airplane. And he turned to me and he said, "Take it to England." And I was 19. And we're going to fly alone. We're going to fly at night so I could use the stars and celestial navigation. And we took off. We went up to Labrador, which is the easternmost part of the North America, and headed to England. And we got out about 900 miles, and he said, "You got to come back. The weather is so bad you can't go over it, you can't go around it." So our pilot said, "Well, can we just hang around and land in Greenland?" And they said, "We have no night facilities in Greenland." So they asked us to fly towards the North Pole and wait for daylight. And when daylight arrived, we found the field and we landed in Greenland. And we were there for about 2 or 3 days. And then we took off and headed for England. Ran into bad weather again, but this time they asked us to land in Iceland, which is a modern city and great airport. Everything was handy for us, so we landed in Iceland, in Reykjavik. We were there for a couple of days, waiting for the weather to clear. We finally went down and landed in England. And unfortunately, the first thing they did was take the airplane away. We thought it was ours. They had to equip it for combat and so forth. And they moved us up to Polebrook at the 351st Bomb Group, just south of Peterborough. And that was our home base.
You're doing fabulous. Please continue.
Okay. At first, we had to learn. Now the pilots had to learn how to fly in formation. I mean, it was one thing to fly by yourself, but to fly in formation. So we flew with the groups as they formed, but we never went across. We just got to the English Channel and turned around, came back. It was just getting practice for the pilots. But finally, on December 7th, we flew the first mission. And what they do is they get you up about 3 or 4 in the morning. You get dressed. And you go for breakfast. And the breakfast was always good. It was bacon, eggs, waffle, whatever you want, because we wouldn't eat again probably for about 9 hours. So after breakfast, we went into this big assembly hall, and the commanding officer came out, and there was a big black curtain. They pulled the curtain, and there was a big map of Europe showing the route to the target and the route back. And then with various officers would come up and tell us the purpose of the mission, what the weather was like, where we would run into flak, which route we should take if we were shot down and landed in Germany. So we were totally briefed. And then we went in and got into our flying clothes. And what that consisted of was a pair of overalls that were heated, like a heated blanket, and a jacket. And then you put on leather fleeced pants, a leather jacket. Then you put on what they call a Mae West, which is a life preserver in case we landed in the North Sea. And then over that you put on a parachute harness. and we carried a parachute as a separate that we could snap on. And then I had to go into another room for more intense training or information on the weather, which was the key thing that I needed to understand the distance, the velocity, and so forth, the direction. And then when that was done, we all went. Those of us that were Catholic went into a room, and a priest would come in and give us communion. That was a must. When all this was done, I found my group, and we were trucked out to our plane, and we sat there for about a half hour, checking the engines, making sure that everything was functioning, and then we taxied over to the runway and got in line, and the planes took off like every 30 seconds. And this was the scariest part of it, taking off, because not only was it night and foggy generally in England, but here we were with a whole load of gasoline. All the bomb bays were full with bombs, and we had to run down the runway about 100 miles an hour before we could lift off. We always feared a blowout or an engine failure or something. With all this cargo and stuff, we didn't land. It would be probably a crash, fire, and so forth. But then it got even more stressful because we took off in a zigzag direction. We started out, maybe went to 2,000 feet, then we turned around and headed up at a different angle so we could zigzag through the clouds. And we were always worried about mid-air collisions because it was dark and foggy, and you're flying blind until you broke through and you could see the stars or the sun. I mean, you were above the clouds. And we did have a situation where they told us to level off at 8,000 feet. We got to 8,000 feet and we were still in the clouds. So everybody was kind of scrambling around. We lost the pattern. And sure enough, another plane showed up in front of us. Luckily, we dove down and the other plane pulled up. And our rudder hit the underside of his plane. It was that close for a mid-air collision. I was terrified. I ended up on the roof. I was bouncing around because we were in a steep dive. I tried to get to the escape hatch, which is in the nose of the plane, to get out. I didn't know if I was at 500 feet or 5,000 feet. I just wanted out. But luckily, both pilots pulled us out of the dive, and we went back to the field, and we could see where the rivets were loose on the wings, where we come out on that severe operation for the B-17, and we didn't join. We just went back. They went back to the barracks. We didn't fly that day because of the near miss. No. I was shot down once. This particular day, we were flying to a place called Mersburg, and we had by that time destroyed most of the German oil refineries. So they had come up with an operation where they could make synthetic gasoline from coal. And this Mersburg was producing 30% of the gasoline. So it was heavily defended because they had to have the gasoline for their operation, for their tanks and planes and so forth. So the way it is set up, we go to a place that we call the initial point, about 30 miles from the target. Now, prior to that, we're running in a zigzag formation to confuse the anti-aircraft. But when you hit the initial point, you have to fly straight and steady because the bombardier has to line up all the bombs, the bomb sites, and head into the target on a straight and level. So what the Germans would do, they would just pump up the flak between the initial point and the target, and we had to fly through it. So this was the scary part of it, all the flak bursting, and you had to hit into it. And the first thing that happened was the engine on the right side was hit, but we were able to feather the props so that we were no longer operating, but the blades were set straight into the wind. That wasn't bad. We just kept on going. That wasn't really a problem. The B-17 can fly on 3 engines. But then we got hit on the left side, but this engine was hit so badly we couldn't feather it. So we kept windmilling. Not only it wasn't working, but it was acting as a windmill. It produced a tremendous drag, and we started down. So immediately we turned around, dropped our bombs, and started headed home as best we could. We were about 300 miles into Germany. So luckily, none that we were worried about fighters because of the stragglers that they had usually went after. So luckily, a P-51 showed up, and he was circling around, keeping the fighters away from us. And he flew with us all the way out of Germany. But now we begin to worry about how long can we stay afloat because we kept losing weight. We dropped everything in the airplane. We jettisoned the doors. We threw out the oxygen tanks. We threw out the ball turret at the bottom of the plane. Just anything that was not our flak suits, we threw that out. Our helmets, we threw that out. But we're still going down. We couldn't keep up with just 2 engines. So now we were worried about getting out of Germany, and the worst fear, of course, was the civilians. We didn't want to be caught by a civilian. They told us if we ever had to go down, we should surrender after, if we were starving, we couldn't survive. Look for a soldier. If you couldn't find a soldier, look for a policeman to surrender to. And if you couldn't find a policeman, look for a priest. But stay away from the civilians because they were very, very much against the flyers, which were destroying their towns and stuff like that. Anyhow, we finally got down and we were at treetop level. Now we were worried about crossing the lines where the fighting was going on. But we got into Belgium and we found a German airfield that the Americans had taken over. And so we landed there. Of course, the runways were way too short. And we ran off the runway into the field, demolished the plane. We all were huddled in the back of the plane, and we were afraid of fire. But we got down, and the doors were open, and we jumped out before anything could ignite. And we were picked up by a truck, and they were didn't know what to do with us, so they took us to Brussels, which was about 60 miles away, and put us up in a hotel. And this was like on the 12th of December. On the 14th of December, they sent a plane and picked us up in Brussels, took us back to our airfield. On the 16th of December, the Germans attacked Belgium, the Battle of the Bulge. So we got out of there a couple of days before that happened. So we finished the missions. The tour was 35. I got to 35, and I had a chance to go to a rest home. They had some castle in England. We could go for a week and just rest up and do nothing, lay around and eat and just relax. And I turned that down because I wanted to finish. I wanted to get out of there. So after the 35th mission, and I was the first one of the crew to finish. Sometimes I flew with different crews because they were short of navigators. and they took us to the holding area, waiting for a convoy. And we finally got shipped to the coast and got on board a troop ship and headed home. In only one day, I heard a loud bang. It must have been a depth charge, but only one. So we got about halfway across the Atlantic and they notified us that Germany had surrendered. But when we arrived in Boston, we were one of the first ships to arrive after the war ended, and there was a big crowd as we debarked from the ship, and they were cheering, and there was a lot of commotion going on, which is kind of nice that we got such a nice reception. The Red Cross was there and serving milk and donuts, and it was really a festive affair getting off that boat. And then I was sent home for 2 weeks. And then I was shipped to Houston, Texas to prepare for going to Japan. Although they didn't do much, they didn't know really hardly what to do with us. And then about a month later, the Japanese surrendered. So they sent us into Houston. We didn't even have to be at the base. They told us to go ahead and get an apartment. You could stay there, come to the base maybe once a week and check in. And because I had combat points, I was discharged really quickly. The Japanese surrendered in August. I was discharged in September, which I came back home. The war was over as far as I was concerned. So I sat around and kind of relaxed and wound down. And my father said, "You've been home long enough. Now it's time to get a job." He worked at Ford for years, and he wanted me to do that. So I went to Ford Motor Company, and they were just in a transition from planes to cars. And I said, "Are you hiring engineers? Are you hiring at all? Draftsmen?" I'd taken drafting in high school. So they said, "Well, look, I'm sure somebody can help you." I was talking to a supervisor, and he said, "Come in." This was Friday. He said, "Come in Monday. I'm sure the manager will give you a job." But over the weekend, my next door neighbor said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I think I'm going to go work at Ford." He said, "I work for the water board, and I see these people walking around with suits on. You could be one of those people. All you have to do is take advantage of the GI Bill. Go to college." I said, "Oh, I don't know. I had no college preparatory courses in high school. It was all manual." That was Saturday. Sunday, he grabbed me again. He said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to go talk to my counselor in high school and see what he says." So I went to the high school. Now he's principal. I said, "Mr. Woodward, what do you think I ought to do?" "You're going to Michigan. No question about it. I got your grades. I'll take care of getting you in there." He said, "Just forget about Ford Motor Company. You're going to Michigan." And so I did. And I ended up with a degree in mechanical engineering, thanks to the GI Bill, So when I think about it, I was kind of glad, to do my part in the war, because it was a terrible war. Over 80 million people were killed, mainly civilians. But we won. Had we lost, if you think of what the Germans did to Poland and all these other occupied countries, starved them or murdered them. Japan was no better. What they called the rape of Nanking. They encircled the city and killed anything that moved. I mean, they were brutal. They had no food. they lived off the land. So they took all of the civilian food, and then they burned their cottages and they burned their fields. They were merciless. I mean, if Japan or Germany had taken over this country, it would have been just as brutal. So, the people should really stop and think about how nice and how friendly and generous this country is. The freedom of speech, freedom of religion. If you're arrested for a crime, they give you a lawyer to help defend you. You're not picked up off the street and never seen again. I mean, it was just, we have all these freedoms that we just take for granted, not knowing what it would really be like had we lost the war. So I have a T-shirt that was given to me that said on the front was a flag, but on the back it said, "If you can read this, thank the teacher. If it's in English, thank the veteran." So then, that's just my feelings. I think I've said enough.
You're doing a great job. I definitely have some more questions.
Sure.
If you don't mind, sir, I'll have you just scooch over. Yeah, perfect. So, on the same tangent you're talking about how fortunate we are to live in the United States or the Western world at large.
Yeah.
The country we live in right now is very different than the country you fought for. People are so divided. There's so much hatred and anger, misinformation. What do you want to see future generations do to make you feel like the sacrifices of your generation were worth it?
Oh, that's kind of hard. There's so much. I guess some people are having trouble just surviving. I mean, they don't. A lot of people are homeless. Unfortunately, a lot of veterans are homeless. They have food problems. They have housing problems. They have drug problems. All these things have developed. I don't remember them being as bad in the early days. Even the Depression, about the people being homeless and all this stuff. It just seems like the country got worse over the years. It seems like I come first. I don't care about you, and it's nice to have people that think of you and take care. Like, I'm so happy that I have two daughters that take care of me, watch over me, make sure I'm comfortable, and have recreation and things that would occupy me. Living alone. I also have a great caregiver that comes 3 days a week, gives me a shower, takes care of me. So I really feel very, very fortunate.
And the care and devotion that you feel from your children and the caregiver, it's a direct reflection of the care and devotion you gave to them when they were growing up.
It's funny you should say that, because I told that to my daughter. I used to take care of you when you were little. Now you're taking care of me, helping me with food and dress and any.
But what I guess what I meant with that statement was that if you were not a good dad, if you were not a devoted father, I doubt your children would care as much as they do. And so it speaks volumes about the way you were as a family, the way you acted and behaved as a family man, The fact that they want you to be happy, they want you to be comfortable, they want to spend time with you. But I digress. Just to get back to the war, if you don't mind.
No.
Can you please tell us about some of the other missions that stick out in your memory? Some of the other close calls you had, and I'll just have you kind of sit back a little bit this way for me, if you don't. Yeah, yeah. But if you could please tell us about some of these other missions that stick out, some other close calls you had, sir.
Well, I can't really remember anything beyond the near miss with the mid-air collision and the being shot down. I mean, it was like a routine. You were nervous, you were scared, but you just did it, and you didn't really, are we flying today, or is the weather preventing it? When you said yes, we're flying, you just got in, dressed and got in the plane and went ahead and did it.
Could you please tell us, when you were flying some of your combat missions, were there times that you saw men around you, like planes getting hit and going down?
No. I didn't see anything. No parachutes, no planes in distress, nothing like. Luckily.
And maybe you could talk a little more. I mean, you were fortunate in the sense that when you started to fly, it was towards the end of the war.
Yes.
Can you talk about that, please? Because the German fighter presence was not the same.
No. Well, at the beginning, they said that for every 4 airmen, 1 was going to be killed, 1 was going to be wounded, 1 was going to go become a prisoner of war, and the 4th was unscathed of every 4 men. Later, we had fighter escort, kept the fighters away. But the flak was always there. I mean, no matter where we went, there was flak. I mean, in just ordinary small cities or airfield, whatever target we had in mind, there was always flak. I can't remember a mission without seeing any flak. So it wasn't near the end of the war, and the fighter presence was luckily not there. I mean, that made a big difference, I'm sure.
And for those who don't know, sir, could you please describe what it's like to be under German anti-aircraft fire? I mean, just what do you see? What do you feel?
Well, when you fly, you can't hear it, but all you can see are these blank puffs. They just appear. I mean, one day we were flying, and this big blank puff appeared out of nowhere. We weren't even near the target. It was just all of a sudden right in front of it. That radar operator had us dead on. The only problem was he led us. It landed in front of us, but we flew right through the smoke. But now the aircraft is efficient up to like 30 feet. So I'm sure had he had the right distance on us, we would have been hit because it was dead on. Right, we just saw this big blank puff right in front of us. He just let us just a little bit too much. But you can't do anything about it. You just see these blank puffs, and you know they're deadly. It's like if you're running through a minefield and somebody's throwing hand grenades at you. It's the same thing, the same feeling you get because you're so helpless. You can't do anything. You sit there. Now, they gave us flak suits, which were overlaid strips of steel, very heavy, but you couldn't move around when you hit the sun, so we sat on them, protected our underside. But that was the only protection we had because the ships are aluminum, they're thin aluminum, the flak could come right through.
Could you please tell us about some of the damage done to your plane after some of the missions?
Yeah, we would. That was what we do. Me and a couple of gunners would go around and count the holes in the plane, in the wings, in the fuselage, in the tail. But one time we, after this flak went off, we could smell smoke, and I don't know where it was coming from. Something was burning, something was hit. But the gunners went and checked around the plane and said everything was okay. But we were kind of worried about what that smoke was coming from. You could smell it in your oxygen mask. Well, what I think it was a troop ship, but it was, I think it was just this, basically they would take the wounded home. There were some of us that were just through with the missions and had finished our tour, but I don't remember seeing any basically infantrymen or anybody other than this whole room was full of wounded soldiers. All I remember was just white sheets, white taped up legs and things like that. And I remember once I was in the latrine, which is adjacent to where they were, and this one fella fell out of the bed, and we all started to see if we could do, and they kind of waved me off. I mean, they wanted to take care of their own, so they just rushed past me. Those that were in the latrine with me, they just kind of brushed me off, and they wanted to get there and pick up this guy that fell out of bed. I guess I'm not sure. I just looked in there and saw a commotion, but they didn't want me involved.
But you went down there right after the German surrender was declared. Didn't you go down, and weren't they celebrating, or?
Not on the boat.
I could be mixing up the story. I thought. I mean, do you remember anything about the injuries?
No. I just saw the commotion. I saw the whole room was full of hospital beds, kind of. I just remember white,
Sure.
And I'm not sure at that point whether the war was over or not, because we were on the boat for about 10 days.
And so where did the boat eventually take you?
Boston, and that's where the crowd was when we debarked, left the ship, and just came down the gangplank, and they were all cheering, because it had just ended a couple days before.
And you guys were among the first.
We had to be the first, because we were in the. I don't think there's a convoy in front of us, but our convoy got to Boston a couple days later, and maybe they went to New York. I'm not sure where they went to disembark, but we went to Boston.
What was it like for you? The feeling after what you'd gone through, all these people cheering you. I mean, how did that make you feel?
Pretty good. You figure you had been through a lot and hear these people that really appreciated. Just like we went on an honor flight. You heard of that?
Mm-hmm.
When we got off the bus at the airport, they were waiting for us, cheering and making a lot of noise, and we were walking like through a gauntlet. We were walking down through the crowd and things like that, and they were very happy to see us. And this was just an ordinary day, and it was just the fact that we were veterans that they were honoring us and cheering. It was gratifying.
Could you please tell us about seeing your family for the first time?
Well, you mean after the war?
Yeah, after you get to Boston,
Yeah.
Take us through how you saw your family and how you got back home. But I really want that visual of you meeting your family.
Well, we drove up, and I remember it was raining, and I had my knapsack, barracks bag, and come up the steps, and they didn't know I was coming home. There was no warning, so my brother came and he grabbed the bag, and took that in. And then my mother and father were standing there, and they were very excited. My father was kind of distant, but my mother hugged me, because it was kind of a shock to them to see me come walking in. For me, the war was over. You know, so they were very very excited to see me walk in, and I have to say, after a couple of weeks, my father said it's time to go to work. he was he was that way.
Could you please tell us, just so I can get a little bit, before we finish, you mentioned, why, I don't know if you mentioned your name, but could you go ahead and tell us where and when were you born?
I was born November 25th, 1924 in Detroit. We lived in Detroit almost. Well, my mother and father lived in Delray, which is a kind of a heavy ethnic area. There were Hungarians, Armenians, and the Polish people in that area, around the area. It was southwest Detroit. But we lived in a pretty well mixed neighborhood, and had no problem. Had to walk to school and things like that. But I just took that for granted. That's the way it is. We played in the street, and they would come down occasionally and turn on the fire hydrants to clean them out. And then we could all change into our bathing suits. We would run into the big stream and had a ball. And that was our way of getting some kind of refreshment.
What did your folks do? What were their occupations?
My father was a tool and die maker, and at Ford Motor, and my mother was just a housekeeper.
How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I had one brother and two sisters.
Did your brother serve in the war?
He came in later as a Marine. After the war was over, he got sent to Saipan, but he didn't have any combat.
So were you the oldest?
I was old. Well, one sister was older. I was number 2. He was number 3, and the other sister was number 4.
Could you please tell us a little bit about the Great Depression and the struggles your family faced, or some families in the community?
Be honest with you, I don't remember my father being out of work. I know that we had trouble. Like I wore tennis shoes, and there was a hole in the shoes. I used to put in cardboard to try to keep it away from my foot, but that didn't work. But eventually, we were generally well clothed, so I had no problem growing up. We had meals. I don't ever remember him being out of work, so everything seemed pretty normal.
What about in the community? Were there some things that you saw that made you realize there was a Great Depression going on?
No. There was no. Although at times we would see groups of hobos. This one area that they collected in near a railroad track, there must have been about 50 of them living there. That seems strange to me. Why are these guys doing that? I must have been about 10 years old, and it was just a novelty to see these men milling around, out of work, and no food. I don't know how they survived when they were all grouped together.
Could you please tell us, before the war, what were some of the jobs you had growing up?
Well, I was peddle papers, of course. That was the first thing. I washed cars. I worked in the shoe store. I worked in like a A&P, which is like a Kroger, as a stock boy. I pumped gas. Worked in a gas station. Those days you had to pump your own. there was no cars or anything like that. So and then when the war started, I got a job in the war factory, working on tank parts before I went into service. So that was good.
Before the war, what were you hoping to do with your life? What was your dream growing up, sir?
That's a good question. I really didn't know. You know, I knew I didn't want to be a tool and die maker like my father, but I took drafting in high school, and I guess that would be my thoughts if once I graduated to just be a draftsman someplace. But I really didn't have any finite plans. And then when the war started, then everything went out the window. It was when do I go in, and which service or branch do I go into? Those were the two questions I had to think about.
Could you please tell us, how did you hear about the attack on Pearl Harbor?
Well, it was on a Sunday, and my brother and I went to show. And we walked in the house, and my parents said the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. And I said, two questions. Where is Pearl Harbor, and why? Because we were concentrating on Germany, and all of a sudden Japan bombs us. So that's how I found out. They told me that we were quizzed that we didn't understand what was going on. You turned on the radio to find out details and so forth, and we didn't get a full understanding until much later. About the Japanese at that time before that we were supplying gasoline and scrap iron. So Roosevelt says, I'm not going to keep supplying this stuff so they can carry on a war with the Chinese. So he told them that either you get out of China or we're not going to supply you with these raw materials. Of course, they didn't get out of China. So then he decided we'll put an embargo on and they won't get any more from us. So the Japanese now had a problem because they were depending on our oil and our scrap iron. But there are other areas in Malaysia, in Indochina, other places that they had the raw material. Manchuria was loaded with raw materials. So they decided that the only way they can go ahead and invade these other countries is to get rid of the American fleet, their battleships and so forth. So their thought was once we cripple all their navy, the American Navy, then we can spread out. Luckily for us, the two aircraft carriers were out to sea, and they didn't get to those, but they destroyed 18 other different kinds of ships, battleships and destroyers and so forth. So that was their motive, was get our Navy out of the picture so they could proceed, and they did. Well, they looked around and they said, well, look, the Americans are in the Philippines, the English are in Singapore, the French are in Indochina, the Dutch are in the East Indies. Why can't we expand when we got all these other foreigners expanding around us? Because Japan is just a group of islands. They don't have a lot of raw materials, so they need to depend on other people. And so they attacked China. That's were kind of ignorant. They were fighting among them. They had warlords that were fighting among themselves, and they had a government, Chiang Kai-shek, but the Americans or the Japanese figured that's all that area. It's got everything we need for raw materials, and the people were no obstacle at all. So they just went and invaded. It's funny about India. The Indians thought, let's get rid of the British and they were going to welcome the Japanese, thinking that it would be better off with the Japanese than the British. And thank God they never got there, but they were kind of waiting on the Japanese to attack India. So, as you probably know.
Thank you for sharing that. So just a couple last things before we wrap up, sir. I'm thinking about your missions flying. What was the name of your plane?
The Little Chapel.
If you don't mind, could you say the name of our...
The name of our plane was the Little Chapel, and I got a picture of it that was taken with another crew, but that was the name, Little Chapel. Everybody was praying.
Did you guys say a prayer? You mentioned that if there was services held.
No, only that the priest would come around and give communion. That was just for the Catholic boys.
But before every mission?
Oh, yes. And you had a sign, which was good. I was worried that if something happened, I wanted my mother to know that I had gone to communion that day. In fact, when I got home, I told her, God, I've been to communion more than you, 35 times, because in those days you had to go to confession. We didn't do it in the service. You didn't go to confession. He just came in and gave you communion. But everybody else had to go to confession and talk to the priest, and you could do it occasionally, maybe around Christmas time, or maybe 2 or 3 times a year. But here I did it 35 times in 28 months, as long as I was in the service.
Well, you did it 35 times in only a few months, because it was just...
Yeah, that's right, from December to April.
So that's, what, 5 months?
5 months. I did 35 communions, yeah.
In how long?
Pardon?
How long did you did 35 communions in how long?
Well, from December to April, it's 5 months.
And when you took those communions, I know you obviously did it, for your faith, for your religious purposes. But did it enter your mind that I'm taking these last rites because I might die?
No, I just took it as in case something did happen. Just in case. I had taken communion prior to the loss of life, And I always wore a medal that Mother gave me on every mission. That was my good luck charm. I still got that medal.
Did she, right before you left to go overseas, did she, give it to you? Or did she just hand it to you? She put it on you?
No, she just handed it to me.
What did she say?
I'm sorry?
What did she say when she handed it to you?
Be sure on where it is. Making sure I didn't toss it aside. She wanted it on me at all times, So I did. Well, as soon as I went in the service, I started wearing it. It wasn't just for the missions.
And my last question about the plane operations is, could you just describe a little bit, please, your living conditions?
Well, they were pretty good. We were in a Quonset hut.
I meant in the plane. Because don't you have to be on oxygen? Doesn't it get really cold and all that?
Oh, in a plane. Yeah, it got really cold. It was about 55 or 60 below zero. And we had this electric suit. But you had overalls and a jacket, so your chest was hot and your feet were freezing, because you had an overlap of 2 garments. But your breath would freeze. You'd come out with a white beard because the moisture in your breath froze on your chest. So everybody was breathing moisture. Oxygen at 10,000 feet. And above, we had to wear oxygen, which was a nuisance. They were breathing into that, constantly. You're trying to communicate. Everything else, it was just heat. And now, they had a tube there if you had to go to the bathroom. They had two, but in all fairness, you never know if that would freeze or not. They told you, try not to get airsick because you would throw up in your mask and it would clog the mask. So then you couldn't use your mask as far as you need the oxygen. So you didn't want to get airsick, and you didn't want to get no bowel movements. Of course, you couldn't do that. You just had everything. You had to hold everything as best you can because there was no way to dispose of that. I remember counting. We go around looking, counting the holes in the plane, and one time we found 30 holes. Sometimes we found 10. Sometimes we didn't find any, but we knew we were being hit, and the plane just kept on going.
And I think what people don't might not appreciate is that when you're in a bomber formation going over the target, you have to stay in that formation. You can't maneuver to try to avoid the flak.
No, you have to stay in formation for protection. You got to stay in what they call the box, and you can't deviate from that. As I mentioned, the Germans would just keep pumping it up, and you just had to fly through it. There's no evasive action once the bombardier started the initial run for the bomb site, lining up the bomb site.
Could you please tell us, sir, about the different targets you remember flying missions to? What kind of targets were they, and what were the names of some of them, maybe?
Well, I've got a list of all the towns we went to, or cities. We never went to Berlin, but it was real marshalling yards, airfields, or factories, or bridges. With our bomb sites, we could be precise. Like they say, you could put a bomb site in the pickle barrel. They used to say. So, but this was an accurate instrument that you could precisely hit a bridge or whatever target you were after.
Did you have any experiences at all seeing German aircrafts, like in the distance, or were you guys ever attacked by German planes?
Yeah, I could see them in the distance. Yes, we could see they were as a group. They were flying parallel with us, but they stayed off. I mean, they never came up close. In fact, later in the war, General Doolittle took over. And he said, we're going to use the bombers as bait to the fighters. As soon as you see these German fighters, even forget the bombers, go after the fighters. We want to destroy the German Air Force, which they did. I mean, they ended up with inexperienced people, and they were running out of gasoline. Their aircraft were pretty well shot up, so after a while they were no threat at all. They were just gone, as a threat.
Could you please tell us about your crew members, who they were?
Well, all of us were 18, we were 19. Well, I went in when I was 18, I came out when I was 20. I think the pilot was maybe 25. Everybody else was in 19, 20. The nose gunner who sat up there with me was from Hamtramck. So that was quite a coincidence. In fact, it turned out I was the best man at his wedding after the war. So he was a good friend. And we had one fella that couldn't stand. He was a radio operator. He could stand the flak. In fact, he put up a curtain. He had a window on the side of his plane, and he didn't want to even look out. I mean, he put up a curtain so he wouldn't see anything. And he was with another flight, and he was killed. The only one member of our crew was killed. He wasn't with us at the time. He was flying with another plane. But other than that, everybody else got through, unscathed, as I would say.
Do you remember that radio operator's name, sir?
He was a Jewish fellow. Mark Scheid was his name.
What kind of person was he?
Well, he was kind of quiet, nervous type, But he was a radio operator, so he didn't really even have to man a machine gun. But it was Mark Scheid, it was his name. So he was the only one we lost.
Get that on video. So is that the secret to a long life? Bananas?
No, but it's good for you.
The potassium.
There's several things that are important for longevity. First thing, exercise. As you get older, you tend to sit around a lot. The second thing is nutrition. There's such things as chickpeas, flaxseed, pumpkin seed. I like seeds. The third thing is sleep. Got to get enough sleep. And the fourth thing is relationships. Being with people. Don't be a hermit. Be with people. Go socially wherever you can. Clubs or whatever. But have people. Have somebody always near you that you can have a relationship with. So those four things.
That's great advice.
I have it pretty good.
Absolutely, thank God.
My quality of life, I think, is pretty good with these people around me,
What life advice do you want to give to future generations? Your grandkids, your great-grandkids, your great-great-grandkids. Based on your experiences, what is something you want them to know for their life?
Oh no, that's a hard question. Well, if they can have peace of mind and carry on, if they have potential, they should take advantage of their talents and utilize their potential. Try to have a pleasant life without too much turmoil. If they have married and have kids, and they have a good job, and they have a good career, they don't do this, but I think they should be religious, bring God into their life, because He's there, willing to do His job. Be kind to people, because people are nice. You just got to get it out of them. They're basically good citizens, like you want them to be, like you are, and do what you can to make life better for other people if you can. It's better to give than to receive, they say. So just be nice people, That's all I can think of.
You mentioned, God in your faith.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about how has that helped you in your life your faith? You mentioned, during
Well,
the.
I can just base this on my mother. I always keep thinking what she wanted me to do. Like they go into communion, I knew she wanted me to do that. Go to church. Now the problem is, I'm really disturbed by the fact I can't go to church anymore. I used to go every Sunday, but I couldn't hear the priest. They're very good to me at the church. The ushers come in, they grab my walker, help me into the pew. I mean, they were very, very nice. But I missed the priest. He's talking. I couldn't understand a word he was saying. It's like right now I can hear you. You're close, but I couldn't hear my daughter talking in the living room. Anyhow, I gave it up just a couple of months ago, as a matter of fact. And now I watch it on television. Every Sunday I watch it, and I can hear the priest. It's got captions, so I want to stick with it as much as I can. Again, I feel my life is better being closer to God than being away from Him. I try to at least on Sunday follow the mass, and there's also a preacher that comes on. I listen to him. So my feeling is, why not go to church and believe there's a heaven? What's the harm of doing that rather than doing nothing? So why not follow the teaching, the Christians or the Buddhists or whatever, and be on the safe side? If something does, maybe there is a God and you will go to heaven. Why not? What's the harm? Yeah. So I kind of keep that in mind during the day. Say my prayers and things like that. Because it's a gamble, but it looks like you're so far ahead if you're right.
And there are also, all the values that come with that kind of lifestyle.
Yeah.
But it's amazing to me. I mean, when you talk about watching the services on your TV, you're so great with technology. Is that something you've throughout your life you've always been good with technology?
Yeah.
Because you were doing things on your phone that I don't know how to do, and I'm 70, odd years younger, 75. What kind of man do you want people to always think of you as? Your friends and your family in the future, what kind of man do you want them to think of you as, sir?
Well,
I know you're very outwardly focused, right, on how you can make an impact on your family, on the community. But when people think about you as an individual, as William, what are the characteristics that are important that they associate with you?
I don't know. I guess considerate, unbiased. I guess I'm not biased or. I've got a caregiver that's black, and I treat her like a daughter, so I don't discriminate. I try to keep people even like me. Treat them with kindness if I can. I have no enemies. Nobody that I avoid. I try to get involved in people's feelings. So I guess that it's a good question what they're going to think of me. So I don't know.
I can assure you that I think anything anyone would say about you is going to be positive.
Yeah, I would say I'll agree with positive. Yeah.
I so much appreciate all your time. You've been so patient, so kind, so generous again with your time. I promise you this is the last question. I told Judy I would ask this. The World War II memorial that's built out in Royal Oak.
Yeah.
Could you talk just a second about why that's important for you as a veteran, that there's a monument being made?
Yeah, I'm very happy. We've been at it for 10 years now, at least 10. But this is another show of gratitude that the state of Michigan is honoring World War II veterans, and it's quite a noble and very arduous project that these people have been going through. It's all donated money. They have all kinds of funding events and so forth. I mean, it's paying off, and it's an honor for us to know that. Well, like they showed you, gosh, excuse me, they showed you the brick, you know, and that's got a lot of lasting memories for me. There were 4 of us now; they're all gone, and this thing will be there for ever. You know, people can come, sit and talk, enjoy the monument, the structures, the statues, and be another remembrance of World War II. It's a great endeavor.
That was perfect, sir. I thank you so much. I'm just gonna grab a couple photographs of you. If you don't mind holding up that plane for me, please.
Okay.
There's a few things I want to cover in a little more detail, sir. You were talking about your flying missions.
Yeah.
Can you describe your role as a navigator? For those who don't know, what would a navigator do, and what did you actually have to keep at the forefront of your mind during a mission?
Well, the important thing is what you want to do is determine how to get to the target and how to get home. Each plane had a navigator that would keep track of where you're at. What you have to do is calculate depending on the altitude, the true airspeed, the wind direction, and the wind velocity. And that was called dead reckoning. There's nothing, you couldn't see the ground. That's another point. We never, very, very seldom ever saw the ground. It was always above the clouds, you know. So you would, you had a pad and you had a calculator, and then you'd sit there and record where you're at by the time, and so you could pretty well assume where you were over Germany. Now there was a lead navigator that had some kind of a preliminary or kind of a radar that they think they could see objects on the ground. So in fact, in some planes, lead planes had 2 navigators. So it was so difficult to find the target without precisely, because the wind changes at different altitudes, the direction, the velocity. So your estimate is not very close to 100%. And sometimes you miss the target, and you might be 5 miles off. The target might be camouflaged, and you don't see the target as you would normally see it. But our job was to keep track of where we were in case we had to come back by ourselves, like we did on my 3rd mission. And so we could get back and get to our field if we somehow lost the formation. That was our job.
Could you please describe of the 35 missions? You mentioned the 3rd one where you had to make the landing.
Yeah.
You mentioned that there was a truck that picked you up.
Yeah.
Who was operating that truck? Who were they, soldiers or?
Oh, well, no, they were just ground personnel that saw us come in, and they came right over. Because the problem too was there were fighters, American fighters, taking off. I could see these the planes taking off, and we were coming in on their landing strip. I don't know how they got a hold of them and told them to look out for us, let us land. But once we landed, the fighters kept taking off and landing, so we could watch the show. In the meantime, the truck came out just from the ground personnel, took us back to their headquarters, the fighter pilots headquarters, and they were just trying to figure what are they going to do with us, because we were not personnel that belonged on the field. So the easiest thing for them to do was to take us into Brussels, the capital of Belgium.
Thank you.
Which they put us up in a hotel, so we were treated very well by the Belgians.
By the Belgians?
Yes. The people were very friendly. One day, I just had to go for a walk down the main street in Belgium. I'm not sure what it was, but I had only gone about 10 feet, and a man come up and grabbed me by the arm and asked me if I wanted to have a good time. And I pulled out my phone. I had no money, and I didn't. So he disappeared. About 10 steps later, this woman comes up and grabs me by the arm. And she could speak a little bit of English, and she said, "You want a good time?" They hit that saying, a good time. And I told her I didn't have any money. And so she just left me, and went off looking for somebody else. But there were two instances, and I hadn't even gone very far down the street. But they were looking at me because I looked so different. I had my flying boots and my flying clothes on, and they knew I was somebody different than a regular soldier, So they were friendly, but I couldn't understand them. I think they spoke French. I know what the Belgian people speak. It must be a
Flemish. So there's just a few other things I want to make sure we touch on. Could you please tell us about the bomb loads you carried?
Let's see. Most of them were 500-pound bombs. I'm not sure. I can look it up if you want to know.
No, I'm assuming you're right.
Probably about 4,000 pounds of bombs. Generally 500-pound bombs, sometimes 250. I don't think we ever carried incendiary bombs. Maybe 1,000 or 1,000-pound bombs. Maybe 4 of those. But they were all... The bombs were put in the bomb bays before we got there. And the way that works is they have a propeller on the end of the bomb. And they put a wire in so the propeller couldn't move. Once we're in flight, and as we approach the target, the nose gunner would go back and pull the wires. Okay. And when the bombs drops, these propellers would spin off, and now the bomb was armed. When the propeller spun on, it was set up so the wind just unwound it, and it flew away, and the bomb was now armed. Up until then, it wouldn't go off. But that was the way they armed the bombs. And I remember looking out the hatch, and I could see the bombs going down, and the propellers all fluttering off by themselves. It's quite a sight.
What were your thoughts about the destruction the bombs caused?
That's hard to say. I had no remorse. I never really thought about what they were doing, except hitting the target. I was hoping to hit the target, and our mission was successful. But the destruction to the civilians and in the other areas of the city, I didn't think too much about it. I didn't let that bother me. is what it's doing is killing people. I didn't dwell on that. I really couldn't, you know, be annoyed or concerned or guilty, or whatever word you want to use. I wasn't that way. I dropped the bombs, that was our job, and we turned around and went home.
It's interesting because there's so much innovation that happens in war, right? It's one of the only things that really unites a population and spurs new inventions and medicines and technologies. But when you guys were dropping bombs, obviously there would be casualties around the war, the target. But it's such a different type of war than a soldier on the ground firing a rifle.
Exactly, yeah.
It's like you're a couple layers removed.
Oh, definitely removed. You just... It's like these battleships that couldn't even see each other, and they were shelling each other 30 miles away or whatever it was. But I had no misgivings about that.
So could you please tell us a little bit about your time in England? Did you ever get an opportunity to go to London on leave?
Good question. I had one time to go to England, well, one pass, and we stayed in Piccadilly Circus, and stayed in a hotel, and the people were friendly, and I didn't see any bomb damage when I was there. However, that night a V2 went off. It shook the bed, and I said, "Oh my God!" The V2 rocket, and it was so close. The whole bed shook. So the next day we left London, and didn't go back. It's too dangerous to be in London. So the next time I had to leave, we went to a small city called Bradford. It's kind of in west central part of England, in a small little city untouched by war, and that's where we spent a couple of days just with that small city away from it was too dangerous in London, especially with those V2s, which are unstoppable.
Absolutely.
So I never went back.
What do you recall about the destruction in London from all the bombings? Is there anything that sticks out in your mind, sir?
No, only what I read or saw. I mean, they must have went through a lot of horror. The thought of bombing every night, living in shelters, must have been terrible for those people. Every time they try to go to bed, the sirens would go off, and they'll go to the undercover. They have to sleep there and spend time waiting for the bombing to end.
Could you please tell us, you mentioned you had this experience with the V2 rocket. Do you remember anything about the buzz bombs?
Only what I read. I never saw one. I did see a rocket coming down. You could see a trail of white smoke. On the way back from a mission, I saw a rocket. I don't know where it hit, but it was ahead of us. I could just see the smoke,
So it was going up.
Huh?
It was going up.
No, it was coming down. The rocket.
Oh, this is when you were over England.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you were okay. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
So,
I never saw a buzz bomb. So.
Could you please tell us? You had so many missions. 35 is a lot. If you don't mind, before we wrap up, if you could just take a moment to really think about: are there any other close calls or memorable things that you might want to mention about some of those missions, or any other?
No, not really. I mean, they stand out in my mind. Just just the third mission and the near miss on the mid-air collision. Those were the two. But it was so routine. There really nothing memorable about it. You get the plane, you fly, you come home. You know. And the other thing is, I meant to say when we got back from a mission, we go into this room, and everybody got a shot of whiskey to settle down. There's a table there, and they hand you a shot. I gave mine to the tail gunner. But then you'd sit down with an intelligence officer, and he would ask, did you see any planes go down? Did you see any fighters? Where did the flag start? And all kinds of questions regarding the mission. See any parachutes and so forth. And then you go back, when you're done with him, you went back and took off all your flying clothes, and you went in and had dinner, and it was always good. It was steak or pork chops, because you're really hungry. And then you go back to your bunk and just lay down, because you may have to do the same thing the next day. So it was all, that was your life,
I wanted to ask you about that. What is it like, as tough as life is for the infantry, like the men on the ground?
Yeah.
They're totally immersed in the war. I mean, they're living in foxholes, the enemy's in front of them. But when you're a flyer, you're in England, which is relatively safe, and then 5 minutes over the channel, you could be shot down and killed.
Yeah.
It's this constant switch between danger and safety, danger and safety. So when you are back at your base after a mission, what is it like, that anticipation before the next mission, not knowing what's going to happen?
I just, as I say, just lay down and try to relax. I mean, I didn't worry about the next mission. It could be the next day, or it could be the next week, depending on the weather. So I really didn't fear going up the next day or the next mission. I wasn't dreading it. I just figured that's just another day, another attempt at survival.